The laughter started before Ethan Cole even sat down. Not loud laughter. Not the kind people admitted to. The quiet kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that spread through expensive tables and polished smiles. The kind that made people feel small without a single insult being spoken aloud. The annual Blackwell Industries Leadership Gala was already underway when Ethan and his wife entered the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Executives mingled beside investors. Luxury watches flashed beneath golden lights. Everywhere Ethan looked, there were tailored tuxedos, designer gowns, and people trying very hard to impress one another. And then there was Ethan. His suit looked old. Not dirty, not damaged. Just old. The charcoal fabric had faded slightly with time. The cuffs showed wear. The jacket no longer carried the sharp shape it once had. Standing beside him, Vanessa noticed the stares immediately. Her shoulders stiffened. Her smile faded. And then something inside her snapped. Months of frustration suddenly found a target. As several executives glanced toward Ethan's suit, Vanessa leaned closer and quietly asked whether he had borrowed it from a thrift store. A few nearby guests overheard. Several laughed. One executive nearly choked on his drink trying to hide a smile. The embarrassment hit instantly. Not Ethan. Vanessa. Because she had expected him to react, to defend himself, to become angry. Instead, Ethan simply nodded and continued walking toward their table. That calmness somehow made everything worse. The silence between them became unbearable. But Vanessa was not finished. Throughout dinner, she compared Ethan to every successful executive in the room, every luxury car owner, every vice president, every rising corporate star. She pointed out expensive watches, custom suits, private vacation photos. Everything Ethan supposedly lacked. Every comparison felt like another cut. And every cut landed in front of witnesses. Across the ballroom, people noticed, especially one woman, Margaret Ellis, a member of Blackwell Industries' board of directors. Unlike everyone else, Margaret was not paying attention to appearances. She was watching behavior. Character interested her far more than status. And what she witnessed that evening left an impression. Because while Vanessa appeared increasingly irritated, Ethan remained exactly the same. Polite, patient, respectful. A server accidentally spilled water near the table. Several executives became annoyed. Ethan helped clean it up. A nervous employee struggled during a presentation. Others rolled their eyes. Ethan encouraged him afterward. A hotel worker dropped a tray. People laughed. Ethan helped gather the broken pieces. Small moments. Insignificant moments. At least, that is what most people thought. Margaret did not. Years of leadership had taught her something important. Character revealed itself when nobody believed it mattered. And Ethan's character seemed impossible to ignore. The evening continued. Awards were handed out. Executives celebrated promotions. Shareholders applauded profit reports. Everything appeared normal. Until an unexpected announcement changed the mood of the entire ballroom. The company's longtime chairman would not be attending. A medical emergency had forced him to cancel. Whispers immediately spread. Investors exchanged worried looks. Board members spoke quietly among themselves. Questions appeared everywhere. Who would replace him? How serious was the situation? Was the company hiding something? Nobody seemed willing to answer. Except Margaret already knew. Because behind closed doors, Blackwell Industries faced a problem few people understood. The chairman's health had been declining for nearly a year. The board needed a successor. Fast. Several powerful executives were competing for the position, some openly, others secretly. Millions of dollars and enormous influence hung in the balance. The board's final decision could reshape the entire company. And after watching Ethan throughout the evening, Margaret found herself asking a question nobody else seemed interested in asking. Why was not Ethan one of the candidates? The question stayed with her long after the gala ended. Because every report she had reviewed over the years contained traces of his work, his ideas, his solutions, his influence. Yet somehow his name never appeared among senior leadership. That did not make sense. Not anymore. And Margaret intended to find out why. Meanwhile, Ethan drove home in silence. Vanessa stared out the passenger window. The city lights blurred across the glass. Neither spoke. The humiliation of the evening lingered between them. Finally, Vanessa broke the silence. She admitted she was tired. Tired of struggling. Tired of watching other couples move ahead. Tired of feeling left behind. Her voice carried years of disappointment, years of comparisons. Years of expectations that never materialized. She believed Ethan lacked ambition, believed he settled for less, believed he could be more if he truly wanted it. Ethan listened quietly. Then he asked a simple question. What exactly was she chasing? The question irritated her immediately, because she did not have a clear answer. More money, more status, more success, something, anything, something better than the life they currently had. The conversation ended without resolution, just like so many before it. But neither realized that night would become a turning point, not because of the argument, because of who had been watching. The next morning, Ethan returned to work before sunrise. As director of operational support, he occupied one of those strange positions nobody fully understood. When things worked, nobody noticed him. When things broke, everyone called him. For nearly 15 years, Ethan had quietly solved problems throughout Blackwell Industries. Factories, distribution centers, customer service divisions, regional offices. If something failed, Ethan usually fixed it. Then someone else often received recognition. It had happened so many times that most employees simply accepted it as normal. Ethan never complained, never demanded credit, never played corporate politics. Many considered that admirable. Others considered it foolish. One person who definitely considered it foolish was Trevor Lang. Trevor was everything Ethan was not. Charismatic, ambitious, polished, aggressive. He wore custom suits, owned luxury cars, appeared regularly in business magazines. Inside Blackwell Industries, many employees viewed him as the future chairman. Trevor certainly viewed himself that way. The problem was that Trevor's success often seemed connected to Ethan's work, a fact very few people noticed. At least, not yet. That same week, a serious operational crisis struck one of Blackwell's largest manufacturing facilities. Production suddenly stopped. Orders backed up. Deadlines collapsed. Every hour cost the company thousands of dollars. Senior executives rushed into emergency meetings. Panic spread quickly. Consultants were suggested. Outside experts were called. Expensive solutions filled conference rooms. Then Ethan reviewed the reports. Within 3 hours, he identified the actual problem. Within 12 hours, he organized a recovery plan. Within 24 hours, production resumed. Millions of dollars were saved. The crisis disappeared, and exactly as usual, Trevor Lang accepted congratulations. Newsletters praised his leadership. Executives applauded his quick response. Managers celebrated his decision-making. Nobody mentioned Ethan, at least publicly. But someone noticed. Rachel Kim, a compliance analyst known for paying attention to details others ignored. Rachel had spent years reviewing internal records. Patterns fascinated her. And recently she had noticed something strange. Whenever Trevor received praise, Ethan's name appeared somewhere in the background. Emails, recommendations, project plans, recovery reports. Again and again. The pattern seemed too consistent to be coincidence. So Rachel started digging. What she discovered made her increasingly uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Vanessa's frustrations continued growing. A week after the gala, she attended a corporate networking event with Ethan. The event took place at an upscale country club. Luxury vehicles lined the parking area. Executives discussed investments and vacation properties. Everything Vanessa admired seemed concentrated in one location. During the evening, she spent more time speaking with Trevor than with her own husband. Trevor knew exactly how to command attention. He talked about future expansion, corporate leadership, upcoming opportunities, the chairman's eventual retirement. Every conversation painted a picture of success, and Vanessa found herself drawn toward it. Not necessarily toward Trevor, toward what he represented, the life she wanted, the status she craved, the future she believed she deserved. Across the room, Ethan noticed. Not the attraction, the dissatisfaction. And for the first time, something inside him shifted. Not anger, not jealousy, sadness, because he realized Vanessa no longer saw him. She only saw what she believed he lacked. That realization hurt far more than any insult about an old suit. But the deepest betrayal was not happening at home. It was happening inside Blackwell Industries, because as Rachel continued her investigation, she uncovered evidence suggesting Trevor's rise had been built on far more than confidence and charisma. Files did not match official reports. Project timelines looked suspicious. Several major achievements credited to Trevor seemed to originate elsewhere. The deeper she looked, the more one name appeared. Ethan Cole. Again, and again, and again. At first, Rachel assumed it was coincidence. Then she found something that changed everything. An archived presentation. 5 years old. Hidden deep inside company records. Officially, the presentation belonged to Trevor. The strategy had helped transform an entire division and earned him a massive promotion. But the original author was not Trevor. The original author was Ethan. Rachel stared at the document for several seconds. Then several minutes. Then she checked another project. And another. And another. Her heartbeat quickened. Because the pattern was not isolated. It was everywhere. Years of work. Years of ideas. Years of solutions. All pointing toward the same conclusion. Someone had been taking credit. Systematically. For a very long time. And the person being robbed did not seem to know. Or perhaps did not care. Either possibility was dangerous. Rachel immediately forwarded her findings to one person she trusted. Margaret Ellis. The board member, the same woman who had watched Ethan endure humiliation at the gala. Margaret reviewed the evidence personally. By midnight, she had canceled 3 meetings. By dawn, she had launched a confidential investigation. And by the end of the week, she reached a conclusion that would eventually shake Blackwell Industries to its core. The company was not suffering from a leadership shortage. It had spent years ignoring its best leader. The question was no longer whether Ethan deserved recognition. The question was how many people had benefited from keeping him invisible. And the answer was far worse than anyone imagined. Because hidden inside company records was a secret capable of destroying careers. A secret connected to Trevor. A secret connected to the board. A secret connected to the chairman himself. And when that secret finally emerged, the man mocked for his cheap suit would find himself standing at the center of a corporate storm unlike anything Blackwell Industries had ever seen. But that storm had not arrived yet. It was still gathering strength. And nobody was prepared for what was coming next. 3 days after Margaret Ellis launched the confidential investigation, the first warning sign appeared. It arrived in the form of a missing file, not a dramatic discovery. Not a shocking confession. Just a document that should have existed but suddenly did not. Rachel Kim noticed it first. The project archive she had reviewed earlier in the week had changed. A report connected to Trevor Lang's promotion had disappeared. Someone had removed it. That was impossible. Company records were not supposed to vanish, especially not historical records tied to executive performance. Rachel immediately checked system logs. The result made her stomach tighten. The file had been accessed less than 12 hours earlier. By someone with executive-level authorization. Someone powerful. Someone nervous. And someone who clearly knew an investigation was underway. For the first time, Rachel realized this situation was much bigger than stolen credit. Someone was actively covering tracks. Meanwhile, Ethan remained completely unaware. His focus stayed exactly where it always had, on work. A severe supply chain issue had begun affecting multiple Blackwell distribution centers. Orders were delayed. Customers were frustrated. Revenue projections were slipping. Executives held emergency meetings throughout the week. Most discussions produced expensive solutions. Consultants recommended costly restructuring. Several vice presidents proposed layoffs. Others suggested outsourcing entire departments. The plans looked impressive on paper, but none addressed the actual problem. Then Ethan quietly reviewed the numbers. Within a few hours, he identified the bottleneck. Within 2 days, he developed a recovery strategy. Within 1 week, performance improved dramatically. Millions were saved once again. And just like before, the official announcement praised senior leadership, not Ethan. The difference this time was Margaret was watching. Very closely. Every email, every report, every approval, every executive presentation. The pattern became impossible to deny. Again and again, Ethan created solutions. Again and again, someone else claimed ownership. The board member found herself asking a disturbing question. How much of Blackwell Industries' success actually belonged to Ethan? The answer grew larger with every file she reviewed. At home, things were getting worse. Much worse. Vanessa's disappointment had evolved into resentment. Resentment had evolved into distance. And distance was slowly becoming something more dangerous. Disrespect. The marriage no longer felt like a partnership. It felt like a comparison. A constant comparison. Every successful executive became a measuring stick. Every luxury purchase became evidence. Every promotion became another reminder of what Ethan supposedly lacked. One evening, Vanessa attended a corporate charity fundraiser. Ethan could not attend because he was helping his father recover from a medical procedure. That explanation only irritated her. She viewed it as another example of misplaced priorities. Another reason he never advanced. Another reason other men always seemed ahead. At the fundraiser, Trevor Lang quickly found her. He always seemed to know exactly when she felt vulnerable, exactly when she felt disappointed, exactly when she needed validation. Trevor was not openly inappropriate, at least not yet. But he understood influence. He understood attention. And most importantly, he understood ambition. Throughout the evening, he spoke confidently about the future, the chairman's declining health, leadership transitions, the direction of the company. Everything suggested he expected something significant very soon. Vanessa listened carefully, and for the first time, she began imagining a life without Ethan. The thought disturbed her, but not enough to stop it. Across the room, another person noticed the interaction. Rachel Kim, the same witness who seemed to appear whenever important truths surfaced, she observed quietly. Not because she cared about office gossip, because Trevor's behavior interested her. Everything about him felt calculated, controlled, strategic. The more she learned about him, the less she trusted him. The following week brought another unexpected development. Margaret requested a private meeting with Ethan. The invitation surprised him. Board members rarely met with employees at his level, especially one-on-one. The meeting took place in a small conference room overlooking the city. Nothing about it seemed unusual. At first, Margaret asked simple questions. Questions about operations, leadership, company culture, employee retention. Then the conversation shifted. She began discussing recognition, credit, professional advancement. The topics felt oddly personal. Margaret wanted to know whether Ethan had ever felt overlooked, whether he believed others received recognition for his work, whether he resented the company. The answers shocked her. Because Ethan did not sound bitter. Not even slightly. He admitted there had been occasions where others received more visibility, but he insisted that success belonged to teams, not individuals. He genuinely believed it. Margaret could tell. The realization left her speechless. Most executives spent their careers chasing recognition. Ethan seemed completely detached from it. As the meeting ended, Margaret asked one final question. If given the opportunity to lead Blackwell Industries someday, would he accept it? The question hung in the air. Ethan paused. Not because he wanted power, because he understood responsibility. Finally, he answered. He explained that leadership was not a reward. It was an obligation. If he believed he could genuinely help people, he would accept. Otherwise, someone else should. Margaret left the meeting more convinced than ever. The board had been evaluating the wrong people. Unfortunately, not everyone shared her conclusion. Inside executive offices, panic was quietly spreading. Several individuals had learned about the investigation. Nobody knew exactly what Margaret had discovered. But rumors were circulating. Questions were being asked. Files were being reviewed. People were becoming nervous. Trevor Lang was among the most nervous, although he hid it well. Publicly, he remained confident. Privately, he began reviewing old records, deleting messages, contacting former colleagues, preparing explanations. The behavior only confirmed Rachel's suspicions. Then came the breakthrough, the discovery that changed everything. Late one evening, Rachel uncovered a confidential archive connected to the company's retired founder. The files were restricted, rarely accessed, buried beneath years of corporate records. Inside was a collection of leadership assessments, private evaluations, strategic recommendations, succession notes. And among them sat a document dated nearly 8 years earlier, a document written by the former chairman himself. Rachel read it twice, then a third time, because she could not believe what she was seeing. The chairman had already identified Ethan years ago. Years. Long before anyone else. The report described Ethan as one of the most capable leaders in the company. It praised his judgment, his integrity, his problem-solving abilities, his character. The chairman even warned that Ethan's tendency to avoid recognition could cause the company to overlook him. The prediction turned out to be remarkably accurate. But one section stood out above all others. A recommendation. A confidential recommendation. The chairman had privately suggested that Ethan should eventually succeed him. Rachel sat frozen. Because this changed everything. The board was not simply discovering Ethan. The company had ignored him for nearly a decade. The next morning, Margaret received the document. She immediately called an emergency board session. Several directors attended virtually. Others appeared in person. For hours, they reviewed evidence, project histories, leadership records, performance evaluations, financial results, witness testimony. The conclusion became unanimous. Ethan was not merely qualified. He was extraordinary. The board quietly advanced him into final succession consideration. Meanwhile, Trevor's position began weakening. Questions about his accomplishments grew louder. Evidence continued accumulating. His carefully constructed reputation was starting to crack, and every crack revealed another uncomfortable truth. Many of his celebrated achievements were not actually his. The pressure intensified further when investors demanded clarity regarding the company's future. The chairman's condition had worsened. Financial markets were reacting. Shareholders wanted certainty. The board could no longer delay its decision. A major leadership summit was scheduled. Investors, executives, media representatives, industry analysts, everyone would attend. Officially, the event would address succession planning. Unofficially, it would determine the future chairman of Blackwell Industries. The announcement triggered a frenzy. Executives launched aggressive campaigns. Political alliances formed overnight. Promises were exchanged. Support was negotiated. Trevor operated as though victory was already secure. He attended interviews, hosted private dinners, expanded his visibility. Everything about his behavior suggested confidence. Vanessa noticed, and that confidence pulled her further away from Ethan. One evening she returned home unusually late. Her explanation sounded reasonable. A networking event, executive meetings, professional obligations. Yet something felt different. The distance between husband and wife had become impossible to ignore. Ethan noticed it. He simply chose not to fight, because deep down he sensed something painful. Vanessa had fallen in love with an image. Not a person. An image of success, status, prestige. And that image no longer looked like him. The realization hurt, but it also brought clarity. For the first time, Ethan stopped trying to meet expectations that were never truly his. He focused on what mattered: his work, his family, his principles, the things that had always guided him. What he did not know was that those same principles were about to change his life forever. Because while executives fought for power, the board was quietly reaching a decision nobody would see coming. Not Trevor, not investors, not Vanessa, not even Ethan himself. And when that decision was finally revealed, the same ballroom where Ethan had once been humiliated would witness a moment nobody would ever forget, a moment capable of exposing years of deception, destroying careers, rewriting reputations, and forcing an entire company to confront a truth it had ignored for far too long. The man everyone overlooked was about to become impossible to ignore. The morning of the leadership summit felt different. Not because of the event itself, because uncertainty had spread through every level of Blackwell Industries. Employees discussed it in hallways. Managers debated it in conference rooms. Investors speculated about it in financial circles. The future of the company was about to be decided, and almost everyone believed they already knew the outcome. Trevor Lang. His name dominated conversations. Business reporters described him as the leading candidate. Market analysts predicted his promotion. Executives aligned themselves with him. Even people who privately disliked him assumed he would win. Trevor certainly believed it. When he arrived at the Grand Meridian Hotel that afternoon, he carried himself like a man approaching a coronation. Confident, relaxed, victorious. The ballroom looked almost identical to the one from months earlier. The same chandeliers, the same stage, the same rows of elegant tables, same polished atmosphere. But for Vanessa, everything felt different. That earlier gala still haunted her. The memory refused to disappear. The cheap suit, the joke, the laughter, the look on Ethan's face. At the time it had seemed insignificant. Now it felt like something much worse, something she wished she could erase. Unfortunately, life rarely offered that opportunity. Across the ballroom, Ethan sat quietly near the back, not because he had been assigned a poor seat, because he preferred avoiding attention. As always. Even today, especially today, several employees stopped to greet him. Some thanked him for helping with past projects. Others wished him luck without explaining why. The interactions confused him. But before he could think about them further, the event began. Board members took their places. Investors settled into their seats. Media crews prepared their equipment. The atmosphere became tense, heavy, expectant. Then Margaret Ellis walked onto the stage. The room immediately fell silent. She began with updates regarding the chairman's health. Then she discussed company performance, future strategy, market conditions. Everything sounded routine, professional, predictable. For nearly 20 minutes, nothing unusual happened. Then Margaret changed direction. The shift was subtle, but everyone felt it. She began discussing leadership, integrity, accountability, character. The words carried unusual weight. Executives exchanged curious looks. Investors leaned forward. Something was happening, and whatever it was not part of the original schedule. Margaret paused. A long pause. Then she announced that the board had completed a comprehensive internal review. The room grew still. Very still. Several executives immediately looked uncomfortable. Trevor remained calm. At least outwardly. Margaret continued. The review had uncovered significant discrepancies involving leadership recognition, project ownership, and executive advancement. Now Trevor's confidence began slipping. Only slightly, but enough. The giant screens behind the stage suddenly illuminated. A timeline appeared. Project names, dates, financial results, leadership records. One by one, major company successes filled the screen. At first, nobody understood what they were looking at. Then the pattern emerged. Each project displayed two names: the executive who received public credit, and the person who actually led the work. A wave of whispers swept through the ballroom. Investors stared. Journalists hurriedly typed notes. Executives shifted nervously. The evidence continued. Again, and again, and again. Every few moments another project appeared. Another achievement. Another success story. And beside nearly everyone stood the same name: Ethan Cole. The whispers became louder. Then louder still. People who barely knew Ethan suddenly saw years of accomplishments connected to him. Operational recoveries, financial improvements, crisis management victories, strategic innovations. Entire divisions transformed. Millions of dollars saved. The scale was staggering. Many attendees initially assumed there must be a mistake. Then the documentation appeared. Emails, original reports, approval records, internal communications. Everything verified. Everything undeniable. The room slowly realized something astonishing. One of the most valuable leaders in company history had spent years hidden in plain sight, and very few people had noticed. Then Margaret revealed the second phase of the investigation: Rachel Kim's findings. The ballroom became even quieter, if that was possible. Evidence of credit manipulation filled the screens. Project histories, presentation drafts, altered records, executive communications. The pattern pointed overwhelmingly toward Trevor Lang. Not criminal behavior, but deeply unethical behavior. Years of positioning himself near successful work. Years of accepting recognition that belonged elsewhere. Years of carefully building a reputation on foundations he did not fully create. Trevor's face lost all color. The confident executive who had entered the ballroom now looked trapped, because there was no argument available. No explanation. The evidence was too strong, too detailed, too complete. For years he had controlled the narrative. Today the narrative controlled him. Several investors visibly distanced themselves. Board members avoided eye contact. Executives who once supported him suddenly looked elsewhere. His empire was not collapsing because of one mistake. It was collapsing because the truth had finally arrived. And the truth was thorough. Meanwhile, Vanessa sat frozen. Every revelation felt like another weight pressing against her chest. The man she had admired, the man she believed represented success, the man she compared Ethan against, was being exposed before hundreds of witnesses. And Ethan? The husband she had criticized. The husband she viewed as unambitious. The husband she mocked for an old suit. His accomplishments were filling the entire screen. One realization became impossible to escape. She had spent years measuring value incorrectly. The realization hurt, because it was not simply about Trevor, or the company, or the investigation. It was about Ethan. She had stopped seeing him clearly a long time ago. Margaret allowed the evidence to settle. Then she delivered the final announcement. The announcement everyone had been waiting for. The board had completed its succession review. Every candidate had been evaluated. Every qualification examined. Every recommendation considered. The decision had been unanimous. The future chairman of Blackwell Industries had been selected. The ballroom held its breath. Journalists raised cameras. Investors leaned forward. Executives waited. Trevor stared at the stage. Vanessa felt her heart racing. Then Margaret spoke. Ethan Cole. For a moment, nothing happened. The name seemed too unexpected, too unbelievable, too impossible. Then heads began turning, hundreds of heads, toward the back of the room, toward a man sitting quietly in a simple suit, toward Ethan. A second later, the room erupted. Applause exploded throughout the ballroom. People rose from their seats. Investors clapped. Employees cheered. Board members stood. The ovation continued growing, and Ethan looked genuinely surprised. Not because he lacked confidence, because he never expected recognition. That was not why he worked. Slowly, he stood. The applause became louder. What everyone witnessed in that moment was not the promotion of a chairman. It was the correction of a mistake years in the making. A good man finally receiving what he had earned. As Ethan walked toward the stage, memories flooded through the ballroom. Employees remembered problems he had solved. Managers remembered advice he had given. Workers remembered kindnesses most executives would never notice. Every step seemed to confirm the same truth. Leadership had been standing among them all along. They simply failed to recognize it. When Ethan reached the stage, Margaret handed him the chairman's pin. The symbolic gesture carried enormous meaning. A transfer of trust. A transfer of responsibility. A transfer of the company's future. The applause continued. Then Ethan approached the microphone. The room gradually settled. Everyone expected a triumphant speech, a victory speech. Perhaps even a speech aimed at the people who had underestimated him. Instead, Ethan spoke about gratitude, about responsibility, about service. He thanked employees throughout the company, factory workers, administrative staff, drivers, maintenance crews, customer support representatives, people whose names rarely appeared in headlines, people whose work kept the company alive. Then he said something that nobody forgot. He explained that titles do not create character. Character creates titles. The sentence spread across business media within hours, because everyone knew exactly why it mattered. The statement was not directed at Trevor, or investors, or executives. It was a lesson, a reminder, a truth many people needed to hear, including Vanessa. After the event ended, reporters flooded the ballroom. Interview requests arrived immediately. Investors congratulated Ethan. Employees surrounded him. Yet despite the attention, he remained unchanged. The same calm man, the same humble leader, the same person he had always been. That consistency impressed people even more than the promotion itself. Meanwhile, consequences arrived swiftly. The board launched formal reviews into executive conduct. Several promotions were reevaluated. Leadership structures were reorganized. Trevor resigned before the investigation fully concluded. His reputation never recovered. The career he spent years constructing collapsed almost overnight. Not because someone attacked him, because the truth finally caught up. And truth rarely travels alone. It brings consequences with it. The hardest consequence, however, belonged to Vanessa. Weeks passed. The excitement surrounding Ethan's appointment continued growing. Business magazines featured his story. Industry leaders praised his leadership style. Employees celebrated renewed company culture. Everything she once claimed to want had arrived. Status, success, recognition, influence. The cruel irony was impossible to ignore. It had arrived through the very man she underestimated. But by then something else had changed. Ethan. Not his personality, not his values, his understanding. For years he had accepted criticism, dismissal, disappointment. Now he recognized something painful. Love built on status is fragile. Love built on appearances is temporary. The distance between them had not been created by success. It had been created by values. And that distance remained. Vanessa apologized. More than once, she admitted her mistakes, admitted her obsession with appearances, admitted the comparisons, the disrespect, the humiliation. The regret was genuine. Very genuine. But regret cannot erase history. It can only acknowledge it. Whether healing would come remained uncertain. Some wounds require time. Others require transformation. What mattered was that the truth finally stood exposed. Months later, Blackwell Industries entered its most successful period in years. Employee satisfaction increased. Operations improved. Profits grew steadily. Trust returned. The company's culture began changing from the inside out. And at the center of that transformation stood Ethan Cole. The man once mocked for wearing a cheap suit. The man people ignored. The man others used. The man everyone underestimated. Looking back, many employees realized something important. The suit had never mattered. The car never mattered. The title never mattered. What mattered was character. The thing nobody bothered to measure until it was too late. And that became the lesson people remembered long after the headlines disappeared. Because sometimes the loudest people in the room are not leaders at all. Sometimes leadership belongs to the quiet person working without recognition, the person helping when nobody is watching, the person doing the right thing when there is no reward, the person whose value cannot be seen from the outside. The man in the cheap suit, who eventually walked onto the stage as chairman, and proved that true worth was never hidden in the clothes a person wore. It was hidden in the character they carried every single day.